There are 3 dirty words in gaming. Pay to win. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Glacial Geek video. I am Phil, the Glacial Geek, coming to you today with a topic that I know is in the minds of not even just wargamers, it's in the minds of all gamers across the world in any kind of context really that you have gamers playing. It's the concept of pay to win. So in video gaming, it means that like the best equipment, the things that help you get along most are paid DLC in the video game. So you can downloadable content. So you can download it, and you will suddenly have a better chance of winning than your opponent who didn't pay for the extra content for the video game. So everyone pays out the one price for the video game, and then anyone who pays more suddenly has a better chance. And there's a lot of people who say, it's like, well, that was my hard-earned money, and I spent it, I should have some benefit for having spent it. And the video game companies all say, we want your money, so if that's what you're willing to do, we'll of course do it. And it became like a very dirty thing, and a lot of places it was, where it was like you had no chance to really compete at the top levels or anywhere further unless you paid for this content and paid for these extra things. And there was a while where a lot of people called 40K pay to win, where you had a lot of the Forge World rules, a lot of the Forge World content, the models that you could get from Forge World just played better, straight up just were better than the models that you could get from regular Games Workshop, which are already pretty expensive, but nowhere near as expensive as the resin that comes out of Forge World. So people started calling 40K pay to win. Unless you were willing to pay the money to play with the models from Forge World, you were not going to be competing at the top levels of the game. And that held for a long time, but I think recently I have seen a shift away from that, where I think there's a shift away from their emphasis on Forge World stuff, especially for 40K. I think they're pushing more of their specialty games in Forge World, and a lot of the aesthetic upgrades. So, chapter marking shoulder pads or specific models for different armies that way. Or even things like an Arvis lighter, which will never be seen on the top table of LVO, but you can certainly buy it for an expensive amount of money from Forge World with the resin. There are still some really cool models in Forge World that you can only get through Forge World, and upgrades and different things you can only get through Forge World, but the difference being that now GW's in-house rules team is handling them as well, their rules as well, and they're not getting updated quite as often as the other ones are, the regular available units that you can get for plastic from their regular line. But at the same time, it's still being written by the same team, not a team that is necessarily looking for a way for their stuff to be more appealing at the higher price point. So with that shift away from Forge World, where they're putting out a lot of the things that Forge World had done out in plastic now, like they're doing with Horus Heresy, things like the Leviathan now being a plastic kit with all of the weapon upgrades that you want without having to buy each arm individually, there is this shift away from Forge World being a pay-to-win, and more of a shift towards Forge World being something that people with more money can do for aesthetic choices. If you like the look of something that looks better, you can buy a fancy-looking dreadnought, but it does the exact same thing and will help you just as much as would a regular plastic one. Or you can try to do it, but you also have to pay extra XP, and the way they've cut XP now, or CP, sorry, the way they've cut CP now, it suddenly becomes, exorbitantly expensive to run some of these models the way they have it there. So their pay-to-win aspect on that side has shifted away, and a lot of people say, well, you still just pay and buy, the newest hotness army that's out there and run them, and that's how you're going to do it. And I get that, but I think what it comes down to is that all of 40K is pretty expensive. I don't think it's a pay-to-win situation. I think they make changes and they keep shifting what units and buffing units that seem like they needed help, and nerfing units that seem to be overpowered and doing too much. And they go along those lines back and forth, and you're always going to have times where certain units are better than others. For instance, my Dark Angel Terminators were really good at the end of 6th, early 7th edition. Then they were no longer a troop choice that I could take with Belial, and all of a sudden they were kind of, garbage tier. They were not very good. I still ran them because they were fun and they looked cool, and I still had the collection for many, many years. Then there came a period there where the Terminators of Dark Angels suddenly, with, the fact that they were had permanent transhuman and were just super rad, did very, very well. And they performed very, very well. And you could get them to be OBSEC, and they did very well for me competitively out there. And a lot of people, complained about them being overpowered. And granted that there may have been. They've been very, very good for what they were doing. But they eventually the changes were made to the secondaries, which now have made them back down to normal levels of choices, and it becomes difficult to play them in a competitive situation. And I don't feel like that at that point becomes pay to win. What happens there is, if you happen to have collected the thing that's the new hotness, you are in a good spot. And you could go out and buy more of that hotness if you want, or you don't have to, and you continue to find your own way along with the meta. The fact is that not all of us are going to be competing for top table of a major GT, and not all of us are going to be, undefeated out there on the table at all times with every single model that we've owned. I think that shifting change, the way that different armies play different ways, actually make things exciting, make things interesting, and also makes it more viable to have a wider variety of units and models out there. If there was just one good unit that was always going to be good, no matter what edition it was, the army would get boring, because that's what you would bring, that's the only thing you would bring, and you would always bring it. And that becomes a little bit annoying and frustrating, if I'm going to be honest. And if they don't shift things up, if they don't change things up, like changing the secondaries, changing the way CP work, changing how the different rules interact, changing which rules that different armies have, if they didn't have those changes, there would be no reason for us to want to keep innovating and keep trying and changing and looking for different things. I think that the meta has been shifting violently in the more competitive scene, especially more so now than it was in the past. Previously, it was literally just a new codex would come out, and that would be the best one out there. And now you look at the top tables, you look at the top lists, and they're coming from the entire gambit of different armies that are out there. The ones that have had 9th edition codexes, yes, are doing better than ones that are still in 8th edition codexes. Sorry, Guard, your time will come. They've shown it. It's coming soon. But that's kind of to be expected, because it's a new rule set that comes out that you're trying to compete with a previous rule set's rules. So in 9th edition, I see more parity between the different armies. And yes, there are times when if you had the money to shell out for 30,000, orc buggies, you could have dominated for the 3-week period that they were super good. Or if you didn't have any Terminators and you went out and bought all the Terminators for your Dark Angels army, you would have been good for like the 3-minute period that they were good as well. I don't know. That might be pay to win. That's one way to see pay to win, where if it's, if you were literally just trying to be at the cutting, the pointed edge of the cutting meta, and you want to have every single unit that is good at any single moment, then yes, you do have to shell out a bunch of money to do it, if you want to do that. But you look at someone like Sean Naden, who only plays Eldar, and consistently only plays Eldar over and over again, and consistently finds himself at top tables at GTs, and consistently finds himself at the top of the competitive scene over and over and over again, without going out and buying a brand new army every 3 weeks. At a certain point, you have to understand that, yes, there will be shifts in meta, and different armies will perform better than others, and there might become hard counters to the army that you run into more or less often, depending upon how popular the army that is a counter to yours becomes. But it doesn't mean that it is only pay to win, where unless you pay the money, you're not going to get it. You can go out there and play a game with whatever models you have and have fun. You may not be winning a GT, but who knows? 3 editions later, like I had from 6th edition to 9th edition, suddenly those models I bought for Terminators became very, very good again for me. And there's that constant shift and constant change. And I didn't have to buy a single dang Terminator afterwards to make them good and have them be competitive. So, do I think 40K is pay to win? No. Do I think 40K is pay to play? Perhaps, because there's a lot of money that goes into this game and into the system. But at the end of the day, I don't think that spending more money will guarantee you better abilities on the table. Because unless you know what you're doing with that army, it doesn't matter what models you have, you still have to face it. And anyone at this point, I think some of the top models now are all out in plastic, and they're all out there as Warhammer's regular line of offerings, because they make more money that way. I think the margins that you have in Forge World are far less than you have in their regular plastic line, which is why they would want you to they would prefer you to buy their plastic stuff as opposed to their resin stuff from Forge World anyway. The Forge World stuff is there as an option for more esoteric desires that you have. And then, yeah, at that point you are paying a premium for these models, but that premium that you're paying for is not for a competitive edge anymore, in my opinion. I think you're paying for aesthetic choices and things that you want to have in your collection. So, is pay to win bad? Yes, probably. If you have a game system that you can only compete in if you just pay more money, then yes, that's bad. Is 40K necessarily pay to win? I don't think so. I think the fact that I was very competitive in the meta where I was playing with my, 6th edition Terminators showed that there's just a constant shift and a constant change in the competitiveness of different builds and the way things go, depending upon the rule sets that are out, the missions that are in play, and how things are going through different editions. And that change, I think, is good. It keeps things exciting, it keeps things interesting, it keeps us wanting to keep innovating and changing the way we play the game. But do I think it's pay to win? I don't think so. I think the only time it becomes pay to win is, at that point, it would be a personal choice to want to be the absolute tip edge of the meta as opposed to trying to do something on your own, which is a choice at that point, is not a requirement. So I think some of these top players that you see out there, yeah, they have a whole lot of different options for different armies, but they're not, they're not buying more armies than, say, even I am. They're not buying more armies than a lot of, 40K YouTubers are doing, because we have to keep things shifting just to have models on the table to keep a variety for battle reports, and they just have them for different options when they play in the different, the different games that they play at tournaments. So I don't think that they're paying their way to the top tables. I mean, you look at some of these guys and they play like the same armies consistently over and over again throughout and over again as things change. And at that point, if they only played those armies, they would still be doing well. You look at Sean Naden, you look at Richard Siegler with his Tau. You look at these top players, they have an army that is their main, that they go with consistently, that they have a fairly large-sized army of, with choices to change out the units that they want with it. And they consistently perform well at the top table and at the top of the competitive scene because of them being good players. And you want to have good players being the ones who are at the top of the tables. Over and over again, these are the guys that are going to be doing well, are the ones who are good players. It doesn't matter what army they have, they're going to be able to beat you with it. And that's what it comes down to. So is it pay to win? No. I think that there are times when you, if you want to go out and just spam a unit right after it comes out with the codex and you don't have any of them, yes, it would be expensive to do so, but that's going to change in 3 weeks. And that's, in my opinion, not pay to win. I think that Games Workshop is emphasizing their new models as ways to increase sales as opposed to, trying to clear out stock that they have. I don't think that the rules team looks at the stock of back orders that they have of models and chooses which one's going to be good, because that's a weird game for them to chase, and I don't think that they're going to sell out their stock in like a 2 weeks time before it gets changed with an FAQ. That's my opinion, and that's what I think about it. The way I've seen the changes, the way things have happened, I don't think that there was 1,000 Terminators that were waiting to be sold off before Dark Angels became good. And I don't see that I don't see that as a viable way forward for their company, and I think that is a way that they've moved away from. I think that they now see it as the way forward is offering up new units, offering up new models, offering up new ranges, like they are with the Leagues of Votan, with the squats coming back, or with the Gene Stealer cults when they come out. Coming out with new armies every once in a while will obviously increase sales, because people will want to buy a brand new army to have it because they look cool or because they do well or whatever it is. And at the end of the day, I think that's how they're going to be going forward as a company, not trying to sell 1,000 Toxicreens. I don't think that's going to increase their stock portfolio or increase their profit margin any differently than any other model that would be bought. So at the end of the day, it doesn't make sense from a company standpoint to try to pick 1 or 2 models from a range to make them super popular so that they become sold out and people can't buy them, because they don't make money from that, and they don't make money from the recasts that are sold out of China. They don't make money from the secondary market. So if it's not going to be profiting GW personally, why would they go about making rules changes for someone else's benefit monetarily? So that's my thoughts on it. I don't think it's pay to win. I think it is an expensive hobby. So there's just the base pay to play that you have going on with it, but nothing more no other ulterior motives from it than really that. They want to sell more models. They want to sell more rule books. They want to sell more stuff to you because they are a company and that's what they want to do. But there's ways to go about it that make way more sense than just making Toxicreens super popular for 3 minutes. So that's my thoughts on pay to win in the game system that we play. I don't think, I just don't see it. I just don't see it being that way. I think there was a period where when they were pushing a lot of the Forge World stuff, where Forge World rules were being handled by the Forge World team, which obviously always has an issue with making sales. You know, Forge World is a niche market. There's not as many people buying from Forge World as there is from the regular store. So they would want to make their stuff the coolest to play with because they're trying to sell it. Yes, but that's why I think that GW heard the calls that people were upset about that, and that's why they folded them into their rules team, so that now Forge World units are under the purview of the same people putting out the plastic models. And at the end of the day, those guys don't make any more money from any of the different sales as anything else. So they're making a rule set that they think is cool, that I think is going to perform well, and then go from there. So that's my thoughts on it. Obviously, pay to win is a hot topic, and I'm sure you have plenty of thoughts on it. And leave those thoughts down below in a comment. I always like to see them, even if I don't necessarily agree with them. Just put them down there. We'll see what happens. Keep the conversation going. So, I hope you guys have all enjoyed this. I certainly have. I have been Phil, the Glacial Geek, as always. And until next time, stay safe and have fun.